I would like to start with this picture. I think this is quite quite dynamically illustrating what Europe is doing, but in total, one could say what the global trend is right now when it comes to migration. The title of my talk includes the word responsibility, so it kind of illustrates how we deal with responsibility. We're shilling ourselves off. We're putting responsibility off, building up walls, militarizing the borders, having actually a big part of the military structure be built around deterrence. So today, I will like to start a little bit by analyzing the contradictions and inconsistency within EU migration policies and their impact on migrants, address a little bit the allegations on human rights, human rights violations, and also the paradox between the EU principles and the treatment of migrants. And of course, dig a little bit deeper in the public perception of the EU stance on migration and the discord between the rhetorics and actions. And I thought there is no better way of doing it than introducing you to this video of Josep Borrell, the EU Foreign Policy Chief, and starting with the self-perception of the European Union. I will play the video now from the beginning. It's very short.
It's a garden. The rest of the world, and you know very well, Federica, is not exactly a garden. The rest of the world, most of the rest of the world, is a jungle. And the jungle could invade the garden. And the gardeners should take care of it. Should take care of the garden, but they will not protect the garden by walls, by building walls. A nice small garden surrounded by high walls in order to prevent the jungle coming in is not going to be a solution, because the jungle has a strong growth capacity and the walls will never be high enough in order to protect the garden. The gardeners has to go to the jungle. The Europeans has to be much more engaged with the rest of the world. Otherwise, the rest of the world will invade us.
Yes, I would like to stay a little bit on this video and try to analyze it with you. It was very important for me when preparing this talk to address our self-perception, at least in the way it is expressed by the leaders or the main responsible for shaping European policy, migration policy, but in general, European foreign policy. So this talk by Josep Borrell actually stirred quite a criticism from the global south, because obviously there is a racist component in it.
Criticismo del sud globale, perché presenta
as possible invaders. Of course, in his talk, he also addresses the walls and says the walls will not be enough to safeguard the garden from the invading jungle. You see, there is there already the civilized, non-civilized, scheme playing in his head, but he doesn't really explain what it would mean sending the gardeners out of the garden into the jungle. And as a Marxist, I have to take history in my analysis seriously. So for now, Europe sending gardeners, that hasn't meant sending people that are ready to, I don't know, foster agriculture, but rather military missions trying to civilize the rest of the world or colonize the rest of the world. I will try to, yeah. The excerpt you see here is from a paper published by TNI 2018 in cooperation with Centro de las. And I think it actually captures the planning and the idea of migration deterrence. It talks about mental walls and how these walls are actually perceived as tools to scare people off, to not let the jungle enter the garden. The picture you see is from exercise that took place 2018 in the Austrian borders, a police exercise. The men you see back here, you see some of them are quite funny with sunglasses, are Austrian policemen that are pretending to be refugees. And this is the kind of preparedness that has been going on over the last decade. So no preparedness in the sense of protecting people, providing them with assistance, but deterrence, border policing, and so on. This picture is also from the same study where you saw the quote before. It's again the study of TNI and Centro de Las. Centro de Las is a peace organization from Spain with quite a remarkable research work, by the way. I chose it because it illustrates very well this deterrence. What are the mental walls, meaning the influence by the far right and the way they shape European policy for very long. At least since 2015, they have played excruciating role in pushing for migration policies that contradict human rights and the international rule of law. Then you can see the different operations that were instead of R&D operations, rather deterrence operations, policing the Mediterranean. And when it comes to virtual walls, this is something we seldomly discuss, but it has to do with the use of biometric systems and other technological advances in order to keep migrants and refugees in check. Here, I think it's quite small. I don't know how big your screens is, but there is a quite good listing of the budgets of Frontex starting from 2005 until 2017. They're actually more the recent studies by now, but you have to imagine the rise. It's more than 200% a rise on the funds. This illustrates the walls that are built, again, stopping 2017. The study, as I said, is from 2018, and then taking into account also the internal Schengen aerial controls. So again, I opened with self-perception, and of course, the question in the room is who benefits from EU migration policies. These things are relevant. This is a screenshot I made from the Frontex internet site. You can see the title, European Border Coast Guard Agency. And for me, not being really a blonde person, it kind of struck me how the European Border and Coast Guard Agency is translated into pictures with a young blonde man with a kind of Nazi hairdo, you know, and the binoculars looking out for the jungle that is about to invade the garden. Here, I thought it was appropriate to mention again that the former director of Frontex, of the European Border Agency, had to resign, was forced to resign due to his implication in procurement of weapons and gear for Frontex. And right now, in 2024, Legeri decided to candidate for the European election with the Front National, this or the Rassemblement National. This tells you kind of where the policies of all these people comes and how interrelated they are with profiting, making money out of the least wretched of this earth, I would say. Because yesterday was mentioned, I decided to share with you also this short video by the Transnational Institute. You can find it in their homepage, and I strongly advise everyone to take some time and read this report, the Global Climate War. This kind of also illustrates the difference between the money that is spent in deterrence and militarization, securitization of the borders, and the money that is actually spent to deal with the causes of migration and displacement. I'm going to play that too. Is 1 minute and 45 seconds, okay? I hope it works.
The consequences of climate change with guns? The world's biggest polluters seem to think so. When it comes to climate adaptation, countries like the US, Canada, the UK, Australia, they're spending more than twice as much
spendono più del doppio dei soldi
for the world's poorest countries. They're building this global climate wall consisting of weapons, and fences, and spying systems, and prisons that aims to seal off the most powerful countries from the impacts of displacement. Our research has found that in the worst offending countries like the US and Canada, that wall gets 15 times more funding than climate finance strategies that could tackle the causes of this displacement. This global climate wall is already causing widespread human suffering, and it will only increase. It can't shield us from climate change. But the fantasy that it can is being pushed by a big and growing border and surveillance industry. And our research also found that that border and surveillance industry has a revolving door with the big polluters, colluding to allow them to continue to wreck the planet. The border industry pushes states to focus on militarizing their response to climate impacts rather than tackling the causes. As climate impacts already shape our world, climate campaigners must work just as hard to ensure governments move towards a just transition. We must build a world where we tackle our shared challenges across borders together.
So I wanted to share the study because I think it illustrates very clearly, again, the difference and imbalance between what is spent on militarization and securitization and deterrence and what is actually spent to deal with the causes of migration and displacement. Again, checking into the values and the self-perception of the European Union, reminding you of how José Borrell is seeing Europe. It is practically all the policies do essentially nothing to actually help secure a safe future for everybody, because the more militarization, the more prone we are to be affected by the climate change, and the more militarization, the less human rights, which will directly, we heard that already yesterday, directly affect the way the rest of the world perceives Europe. So I'm sorry, it's a little bit difficult with the mouse. Again, deterrence and militarization. I'm kind of breaking this down. On the one hand, deterrent tactics means scare tactics that affects migrants and also have ethical and humanitarian rights consideration, the border security, and how the adaptation of these measures to control and regulate the movements of migrants across Europe actually shields off Europe from its real problems, and the impact of militarization on borders and migration policies. Practically, what the European Union has been doing is delegating the EU border management to third countries. We heard that already yesterday by Judith. Since 2016, we've been, this has been, let's say, a standard policy. It started with the EU-Turkey deal signed on March 2016, where basically Europe allowed Erdogan to take advantage of the about 2 million Syrians staying in Turkey and use them as a means of blackmail in order to secure more funds or silence of the European Union regarding his war against the Kurds and the way they consequently suppress the Kurdish minority in the country. This has continued with national deals or bilateral deals being struck, the latest being Italy-Albania, but we've known already about the Italian-Libyan deals, and there are numerous of such deals, also numerous deals that the European Union is striking around our borders, some of them not really being named as migration deals, but they have they're embedded in conditionalities that are tapped, let's say, to what we used to call development help. Yes, framing migration as a security threat is also something that has been going on for a long time. I welcome everybody to take a look at the European Action Service and their page. Every year they publish something like a risk assessment for the European Union and its security. Until the Russian invasion to Ukraine, the #1 threat named in these reports consequently for 5 or 6 years was actually migration. By doing so, of course, they reinforce the myth of population replacement and all these conspiracy theories we keep listening from both sides of the Atlantic. And of course, again, the humanitarian implications, ethical and legal considerations of the external border control are basically completely silenced. They don't play a role anymore in the public discourse. So what we tend to forget, or the European officials tend to forget when pushing a negative, let's say, mood within the public towards migrants and refugees, is that the European arms industry is one of the strongest globally and one of the biggest profiters from wars. We have been consequently exporting arms in regions that are in a conflict situation. We see this happening also right now, not only in Ukraine, but also, for example, Germany continues to provide Israel with arms that are later on used to attack civilians in Gaza. And you have again this double morale in there, because, for example, just 2 days ago, I wanted to make a slide about that as well, by the way. A German Greens official said, well, we're sending weapons, but we're also taking orphaned children back to Germany, which is like a really insensitive thing to say or to do, to say the least. Like, we help these kids to become orphans, and then don't worry, we're going to take them in Germany and raise them as good Germans. Here, I also wanted to say that the complex, I mean, this is again the newest study of TNI by Manya, great researcher, looking at the role of the IOM. The IOM, the International Organization of Migration, profiling itself as the UN agency of migration. But if you take a good look at this, and I really recommend this study as well, you will see that it's practically a migration management international organization funded by the European Union and the Global West. And its main focus is actually, again, deterrence when possible and repatriations. Yeah, path to solutions. I mean, first of all, identifying comprehensive approaches like we tried to do yesterday, like what would actually a good migration policy looks like, is of course very important. Humanitarian aid. Here I would like to stress then that in the last years they have been in a very, very bad development, particularly the last 2 years, because in the northern of European Union governments of the Scandinavian countries, including also Denmark, that used to be very progressive with this politics, have actually set a very bad example when it comes to migration politics, starting from Denmark's very bad policy on confiscating all valuables from migrants when they enter the country to cover their own costs, and going as far as Finland and Sweden with a new participation of far right in the government, reducing development aid being a hope that it could, let's say, stop the causes of migration in the countries where people flee from, and instead of that, really expanding subventions to the fossil industry, for example, also a prime cause of migration in different parts of the world. And what I do believe that we actually need would be a real European peace policy, the meaningful reform and collaborative efforts in order to have sustainable migration policies means that Europe would actually care of protecting peace instead of being part of the race of the arms industry. Yes, I hope it was somehow comprehensive.